The Xylar Confederation prided itself on being the most advanced alliance of species in a known galaxy. Their civilization had evolved beyond primitive notions of emotion-driven decision-making. Everything was meticulously cataloged, analyzed, and processed according to logical frameworks that had been refined over millennia. Their monitoring systems were particularly impressive. A vast network of sensors and analysis units that observed millions of worlds across thousands of galaxies, all operating under strict protocols for every conceivable scenario. On an unremarkable day by Xylar standards, which, given their 17-dimensional timekeeping system, would be impossible to translate into Earth terms, a priority alert flashed across the central command center of the observation fleet. Strategic Anomaly Point, Level 7, announced the alert system in the universal translation frequency that all Xylar members were neurologically attuned to receive. Svax, a crystalline entity who served as the senior observation coordinator, immediately redirected their attention to the anomaly. Level 7 anomalies were rare enough to merit direct supervision, especially when they occurred on planets that had been flagged as inconsequential chaos. The Xylar classification for worlds that contained intelligent life but posed no strategic value or threat. Location. Svax's thought patterns resonated through the command network. Sol system, third planet. Classification, Earth. Predominant species, human. Current threat assessment, negligible chaos. The central holo display shifted to show a real-time observation feed from Earth. The Xylar had long ago positioned thousands of microscopic observation units in Earth's atmosphere, completely undetectable by human technology. The feed zoomed in on a public recreational area, what humans called a park, focusing on a single bench where a human male sat motionless. "That's it? That's the Level 7 anomaly?" asked Mraxi, a gaseous entity who served as tactical assessment officer. "It's just sitting there." He is just sitting there, corrected Svax, who prided themselves on accurate taxonomic descriptions. Human, male, early fourth decade of life cycle based on physical development markers. And yes, that is precisely what triggered the alert. The command center fell silent as they all observed the human. He appeared completely ordinary, average height and build, dressed in what the Xylar database identified as casual attire appropriate for the local climate and social setting. He sat on a wooden bench, eyes partially closed, barely moving except for the minimal biological functions necessary for human survival. "Run comprehensive biometric analysis," ordered Svax. The results were puzzling. Heart rate, 52 beats per minute, considerably below the typical resting rate for human males of his apparent age and physical condition. Respiration, shallow and slow, only 8 breaths per minute. Body temperature, slightly below normal human parameters. Neural scan, Svax commanded next. What they saw caused a ripple of unease to pass through the command center. The human's brain activity displayed patterns of energy that were extraordinarily complex, intense yet completely undecodable by any of the Xylar's standard cognitive models. It matched no known pattern for logical thinking, emotional processing, strategic planning, or any of the millions of mental states cataloged in their vast database. "Apply standard behavioral interpretation protocols," Svax ordered, maintaining their composure despite the growing sense of discomfort. "Unable to categorize," replied the automated system. "Subject behavior does not match parameters for rest, predatory stalking, meditation as defined by Xylar interpretive frameworks, or any other state in our cross-species database." "How long has the subject been in this state?" asked Mraxi. 47 Earth minutes, with minimal variation," responded the system. Murmurs of confusion spread through the command center. Junior analysts began questioning the reliability of their equipment. More experienced members started considering implications of a form of existence or technology beyond their understanding. "Could it be some form of primitive stasis?" suggested Klixa, a mechanical entity who specialized in analyzing developing species. "No," replied Svax definitively. "Humans have not developed functional stasis technology. This is biological, not technological. Perhaps a pathological state?" offered Mraxi. Negative. Brain activity suggests heightened function, not impairment. The confusion grew. Entities of various compositions, gaseous, crystalline, mechanical, and several states that had no equivalent in human science, all expressed their bewilderment in their own ways. Some vibrated at uncomfortable frequencies. Others emitted concerned pheromones or electromagnetic pulses. "I have never seen anything like this," admitted Drix, the oldest member present, a semi-liquid entity who had observed 17 species evolve from pre-technological states to space travel. "The stillness is unsettling," added Klixa. "It doesn't align with any known human behavioral pattern." "It must be some form of communication or interaction we don't understand," suggested another analyst. "With whom?" asked Mraxi. "The subject is alone. Perhaps not in ways we can perceive," Svax responded, their crystalline structure dimming slightly in what passed for concern among their kind. The human, meanwhile, continued to sit, oblivious to the interstellar panic he was causing. The only movement was the occasional slow blink or slight adjustment of his position. "Deploy enhanced observation units," ordered Svax after several minutes of collective uncertainty. "This requires comprehensive analysis." Within moments, the Xylar had redirected their most advanced stealth observation craft to Earth's atmosphere. Technological marvels that could analyze quantum fluctuations in a specific human hair follicle without being detected by even the most advanced human instruments now focused entirely on the sitting man. From the depths of the Confederation's central database, the most accomplished xenopsychologists and strategic analysts were summoned to evaluate the situation. The Xylar took nothing for granted when it came to potential threats. Even a seemingly inconsequential anomaly warranted thorough investigation. That was how they had survived and thrived for millions of years while other civilizations rose and fell. The analysis team assembled quickly, their collective expertise representing over 12,000 years of study across hundreds of species. They watched the feed in silence, occasionally exchanging data packets of theories and observations. "This must be an extreme form of mental discipline," proposed Dr. Zell, a leading xenopsychologist whose work on primitive cognitive development was required study for all Xylar observers. The neural patterns suggest something akin to what ancient texts described as warrior monks in the Andromeda conflicts, beings who could harness mental energy to create spiritual shields or prepare devastating psychic attacks. The mention of warrior monks sent a ripple of discomfort through the command center. Those legends were considered apocryphal fantasies, bedtime stories to frighten juvenile Xylars, not actual historical accounts. "That's absurd," countered military strategist Frex. "The posture and positioning reveal a perfect ambush stance. Notice how the subject maintains an optimal vantage point for surrounding threats while appearing non-threatening. The calmness before a storm. The stillness is a tactical advantage, maximizing environmental camouflage." The strategist's analysis triggered a new wave of concern. "Observe the sight lines," Vrex continued, projecting a three-dimensional map of the park with highlighted vectors. Despite appearing to look at nothing or having eyes nearly closed, the subject has perfect coverage of all potential threat vectors. This is advanced tactical positioning that suggests military training beyond what we've documented in human civilization. Cultural specialist Sin, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly accessed the Ancient Records Archive, a repository of information so old that most Xylars had forgotten it existed. There are obscure references in forgotten texts, Sin began slowly, to entities known as the Silent Cult or the Still Ones, beings who could collapse civilizations merely by their presence. The descriptions are fragmented, but they speak of a stillness that defies comprehension, a presence that bends reality through perfect inaction. The command center had grown so quiet that even a normally imperceptible hum of the quantum processors seemed loud. The human on the bench shifted slightly, scratching his forearm in a slow, absent gesture. Alarms blared across the command center. Red warnings flashed on all displays. "Movement detected," announced the automated system. "Analysis," demanded Svax, their crystalline structure vibrating with tension. Inconclusive, replied the system. The gesture does not match any cataloged human combat initialization sequence, but the neural activity spiked precisely 2.7 microseconds before physical movement began. Anticipatory action, murmured Vrex. The subject is adjusting internal energy systems, calibrating an innate weapon system, or sending microsignals to concealed allies. The tension in the command center was palpable. Several junior analysts had to be excused when their physical forms began to destabilize from stress. We need to understand this phenomenon, declared Svax. Begin simulation protocols. Attempt to recreate the subject's state for analysis. This commenced a series of increasingly catastrophic experiments. A group of gaseous xylars attempted to maintain the exact same position for an equivalent time period, resulting in accidental molecular reorganization when they forgot to maintain their standard atomic circulation. 3 mechanical xylars crashed their operating systems, trying to mimic the seemingly random but precisely timed eye blinks of the human. A particularly brave crystalline entity attempted to recreate the neural patterns observed in the human's brain, only to shatter into thousands of pieces when the contradictory energy flows proved incompatible with their crystalline structure. Most disturbing was the fate of the advanced analytical AI, which attempted to model the human's thought process based on the neural scans. After 42 seconds of processing, it began to repeat the phrase, "The stillness contains everything. The emptiness is full. The nothing is everything," before shutting down completely. Back on Earth, Kevin Matthews, for that was indeed the sitting man's name, continued his unremarkable existence, completely unaware of the interstellar crisis he was causing. Had anyone told him that the most advanced alien civilization in the galaxy was in complete disarray because he was sitting on a bench, he would have laughed or possibly been concerned about the mental health of the person telling him such a ridiculous story. The minutes ticked by. The Xylar's confusion and concern grew exponentially. Theories became more elaborate and more terrifying. Perhaps this was a new form of human, a mutation that had developed capabilities beyond their understanding. Perhaps it was not human at all, but an entity using a human form as camouflage. Perhaps it was a manifestation of an interdimensional being, anchoring itself to this reality through the seemingly mundane act of sitting. The worst possibilities were too terrible to voice aloud, but they resonated through the collective consciousness of the command center. What if this was something older than the Xylar? What if this was something that defied categorization because it existed outside the very frameworks of understanding they had built over millions of years? As the Xylar's best minds struggled to comprehend the incomprehensible, Kevin Matthews did something that would forever alter galactic history. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a slightly stale piece of bread, and began to slowly break it into crumbs for the pigeons that had gathered near his bench. The Xylar command center exploded into chaos. "Activation sequence initiated," screamed the automated alert system. "Unknown substance deployment detected. Analyze the material immediately," ordered Svax, their voice carrying a harmonic that indicated extreme stress, something none of the junior officers had ever heard from a senior coordinator before. "Preliminary analysis indicates processed carbohydrates, common Earth wheat, partially degraded by environmental exposure," reported the science officer. "But the deployment pattern is unlike any documented human feeding behavior. The subject is dispersing the particles with a precision that suggests nanomaterial dispersal," finished military strategist Vrex grimly. "Classic activation of dormant technological agents. The birds are carriers, possibly automated biological drones designed to spread the material further. The neural activity has shifted," announced another analyst. "New patterns emerging. Still incomprehensible, but distinctly different from the previous state." The stillness was preparation, whispered cultural specialists in. Now we witnessed the action. The tension in the command center was unbearable. Junior officers were openly discussing evacuation procedures. The more experienced members were calculating the shortest quantum jump routes out of the Sol system. In a breach of protocol that would have been unthinkable hours earlier, information about the Earth anomaly was shared with allied species. The news spread rapidly through diplomatic channels, causing widespread alarm across multiple galaxies. The Zith Collective, known for their emotional volatility, immediately began preparation for a mass exodus to another supercluster. The Galorn Empire, despite their reputation for fearlessness, doubled their defensive perimeter and activated ancient weapons systems that had lain dormant for millennia. The quantum consciousness of Rigel 7 fractured into countless subminds out of sheer terror, a defense mechanism not seen since the infamous dark matter incursion of the previous cosmic cycle. Within hours, the most outlandish theories had gained credibility simply because no one could offer a rational alternative. Some suggested Kevin was a multidimensional entity anchoring reality itself. Others believed he was a living wormhole, a conscious breach in space-time. The most terrifying theory, which gained traction among the highest echelons of Xylar leadership, was that he was a mimetic weapon, a concept so alien and incomprehensible that merely observing it could infect other consciousnesses with irrationality. Meanwhile, Kevin continued to feed the pigeons, occasionally glancing at the clear blue sky, completely unaware that his every movement was being analyzed by thousands of advanced alien minds. Perhaps he was enjoying the pleasant weather, killing time while waiting for someone, or simply had nothing better to do on his day off. The Xylar fleet was put on highest alert. Evacuation plans were hastily drafted. The question of whether to attempt communication with the entity was debated fiercely, but no consensus could be reached. How does one communicate with something that defies all known parameters of existence? As the crisis reached its peak, Kevin checked his watch and appeared to notice the time. He gathered his things, a simple action that triggered 17 different alarm systems across the Xylar monitoring network. The entity is initiating the next phase, declared Vrex, who had by now convinced himself that Kevin was some form of ultimate predator. It appears to be activating a temporal reference device, possibly to synchronize with other agents or to calibrate a temporal weapon. The supreme command of the Xylar Confederation was paralyzed with indecision and fear. Factions had formed among the leadership. Those who advocated for a preemptive strike, though no one could articulate what exactly they would be striking against or how. Those who pushed for complete withdrawal from the galaxy, and those who believed negotiation was the only option, though they couldn't agree on what terms they could possibly offer. Unable to understand, unable to counter what they perceived as a threat, the fear of inevitable destruction from a force beyond imagination became overwhelming. The once proudly logical Xylar leaders, from the most rational scientific minds to the most battle-hardened warrior kings, felt something they had evolved beyond millennia ago. Helpless primal terror. In a moment of collective desperation, overriding thousands of pages of protocol and multiple approval levels, the Supreme Council of the Xylar Confederation made an unprecedented decision to send a direct message. Using their most advanced psychic amplification technology, they projected a solar system-wide message, focused on Kevin, an urgent plea for mercy in the universal language of fear and submission. They identified themselves as the lesser beings who have disturbed your great presence, begged forgiveness for daring to observe that which cannot be understood, and offered resources, technology, colonial planets, power, anything, if only the great entity would cease its silent judgment/impending annihilation. The message, a complex mix of telepathic impressions and universal concept symbols, was designed to be understood by any form of consciousness, from the simplest microorganism to hypothetical entities that existed outside conventional reality. On the Xylar vessels, the tension was unbearable as the message was sent. Officers and crew alike waited, expecting either a response or their imminent destruction. Some had entered voluntary stasis, unable to bear the stress. Others had begun recording final messages to their spawn clusters. Kevin Matthews suddenly felt an odd headache and a strange chill. He looked around, confused, but saw nothing unusual. The park was as peaceful as ever. A few people walking dogs in the distance, children playing on the swings, pigeons still pecking at the breadcrumbs around his feet. After a few seconds, the sensation passed. Kevin glanced at his watch again, stretched, and slowly stood up. He brushed a few crumbs from his jeans, took one last look at the sunny sky, and began walking away from the bench. The abrupt departure of the threat was registered with stunned disbelief throughout the Xyler Command Center. The entity had vanished as suddenly and mysteriously as it had appeared. The initial wave of relief quickly gave way to a deeper existential horror and confusion. They did not interpret this as a victory or an end, but as a temporary forgiveness from a superior force beyond reckoning, a warning about the existence of things they could never comprehend. Immediate withdrawal, ordered High Commander X, the supreme military leader who had personally taken command of the situation. All vessels, maximum quantum displacement. I want every Xyler unit outside this solar system within the hour. The entity, began Svax, has granted us mercy, interrupted ZYX, or perhaps merely postponed our judgment. Either way, we will not squander this opportunity. The Xyler fleet and its allies retreated from the solar system at maximum speed. Earth was immediately reclassified with the highest danger rating, Omega category, unknowable indifference. Approach only under extreme duress and with full apologetic preparations. A new department was established within the Xyler Confederation, the Bureau for Research into Translogical Phenomena and Maintenance of Absolute Safe Distance from Humans. Kevin Matthews got home, completely unaware that he had just caused an entire galaxy to beg for mercy. He found himself complaining about the mild headache he'd experienced in the park and contemplating what to have for dinner. In the months and years that followed, the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy remained forever haunted by the memory of the Sitting One. Their social structures and scientific endeavors were altered by a shared fear of what they could not understand. New religions worshipping the great stillness formed on distant worlds. Some brave or foolish xenoarchaeologists occasionally proposed expeditions to observe Earth from extremely safe distance, but funding for such dangerous ventures was scarce. The few observations they managed to conduct only deepened the mystery. Millions of humans engaging in the inexplicable practice of sitting for various lengths of time, often in groups, sometimes alone, sometimes while manipulating small electronic devices, sometimes while consuming food or beverages. What did it mean? What terrible power were they channeling? What cosmic secrets did they possess? The questions remained unanswered, but one thing was certain. The humans, in their incomprehensible stillness, had proven themselves to be the most terrifying species in the known universe. Kevin Matthews continued his ordinary life, occasionally sitting on that same park bench when the weather was nice. Sometimes he fed the pigeons. Sometimes he checked his phone. Sometimes he just enjoyed the sunshine and thought about nothing in particular. And every time, without his knowledge, advanced alien monitoring systems recorded his every movement, analyzed his every breath, and reported back to a galaxy that lived in fear of the day when the humans might decide to do more than just sit. The Xyler Confederation, once proud of their logical superiority, now understood that there were things in the universe that defied logic itself, and that perhaps their greatest achievement would be maintaining a respectful distance from the inexplicable terror that was a human being simply sitting on a bench. And so it was that every time Kevin Matthews or any other human sat down for a moment of rest, entire civilizations across the galaxy held their breath in terror, waiting for a judgment that, from their perspective, seemed perpetually imminent, yet mercifully delayed. Meanwhile, Kevin just wondered if he should have pizza or Chinese takeout for dinner.